Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we'll be putting the 4 melee DPS of Final Fantasy XIV against each other in our latest episode of the Versus series. This video is meant to discuss the pros and cons of each of the melee DPS to help better identify which one you may want to play. All jobs have been used in all of the game's content, so this video should not dissuade you from using one due to balance reasons. Also, all 4 melee DPS have access to the same role actions, though if we have to, we'll bring up certain synergies these role actions may have with the individual jobs. Let's get right into it. First up on the list is one of the game's 2 original melee jobs, the Monk. Dating all the way back to Final Fantasy I, this job has been a staple of the franchise for over 30 years. Monk primarily focuses on executing positional-based attacks to change their fighting stance between one of 3, Oppo Oppo, Raptor, and Coral. Each stance provides set benefits to specific skills, so knowing when to utilize the bonuses of each skill is important to maintaining buffs and debuffs. The Perfect Balance skill allows you to benefit from these bonuses regardless of stance for 10 seconds, making it excellent at quickly refreshing any buffs or debuffs after a mid-battle intermission or mistake. While all 3 stances are key to your offense, the Coral stance skills generate a stacking buff called Greased Lightning. Maxing out at 3 stacks, this buff provides improved attack speed and damage, so many of the Monk's skills are focused around maintaining this buff. Form Shift lets you change form without hitting a target to get into Coral stance faster, or to start in it for the beginning of a fight. Riddle of Earth lets you refresh the timer on your stacks when you take damage under this effect, while also reducing the damage that you take. Perfect Balance, we mentioned earlier, is most often used to generate these stacks quickly. Shoulder Tackle, a gap-closing skill that damages and stuns, can also be modified to generate a stack of Greased Lightning when using Fist of Wind, and finally, Tornado Kick allows you to expend all of these stacks for a high burst of damage. It's pretty common to use Tornado Kick and then use Perfect Balance to get the stacks back. At later levels, Monk can also generate stacks of chakras, either through their meditation skill or when landing weapon skills that critically hit. At 5 stacks, they can be expended on either Forbidden Chakra, which is a large single target burst attack, or Purification, which just restores some TP. Additionally, their level 70 skill, Brotherhood, allows the Monk to generate stacks occasionally when allies use weapon skills while benefiting from the buff. The buff itself also provides the party and the Monk themselves with a 5% increase to physical damage, so it's a very important part of Monk's performance. Monk does also come with a bit of utility outside of their role actions. Brotherhood we mentioned already for that physical damage buff. Their other utility is Mantra, which provides a massive increase in healing received to anyone in range of the Monk. This used to be a role action or a cross-class skill in the previous expansions, but now it is a Monk exclusive and can come in clutch during intense heal checks. They do have other utilities such as the AoE silence on Armor of the Destroyer, or the true stun of One Ill Punch, but these utilities are rarely utilized. So the pros of the Monk. The job is considered one of the faster-paced jobs in the game without the need to stack too much skill speed. With the constant position swapping, fast attack speed, and management of stacks, it can be the perfect fit for players who find other jobs playing a bit slower or less interactive. The job also provides incredibly high single target damage and moderate to high sustained and burst AoE for a melee job. With pros like that, on top of their personal utilities, the job is a great contender for a party slot in endgame content. Monk isn't perfectly balanced, however. It at times can be just as much a con as a pro that it has so many positionals. While when it's a pro, it makes the job feel engaging, as a con it makes fight with strict positional checks for the party a bit more of a pain, and it'll make you beg for True North to be a shorter cooldown. The utilities it offers, while nice, pale in comparison to some of the other melee jobs, especially considering Brotherhood only buffs physical damage and not overall damage. Its AoE is also heavily dependent on the use of Perfect Balance for the ability to spam Rockbreaker, and Rockbreaker is a conal AoE, so larger monsters or larger packs of monsters can be a little bit tedious to properly AoE. However, a skilled Monk will bring all the pain. At this point, all it needs is a suplex. Next up, let's cover the other OG melee job, and that of the Dragoon. While its origin doesn't date back as far as Monk, it has become a franchise favorite over the years, in no small thanks to the character Kain from Final Fantasy IV. Dragoons focus on slower strikes that hit harder, balancing a number of personal and party buffs that synergize with all sorts of compositions. The primary aspect Dragoon has to manage for themselves is Blood of the Dragon. This buff enhances the job's iconic jump skills and grants access to a number of the job's more powerful skills, including Jerskogul, a high-potency line AoE. At max level, jumps Ready Mirage Dive. This skill lets you open up eyes on your Blood of the Dragon. At 3 eyes, executing Jerskogul transforms Blood of the Dragon into Life of the Dragon. This transforms your Skogul into Nastron, which hits harder and can be used much more frequently for the duration of Life of the Dragon. While it sounds like Dragoon is mostly worried about its own buff management, the job has incredible value in terms of increasing raid DPS. Its most prominent tool is Disembowel, a mandatory part of their combos that causes piercing attacks to deal 5% more damage. This synergizes with the Dragoon themselves, of course, but it also acts as a consistent DPS increase for bards and machinists. They also have Battle Litany, which buffs nearby party members' critical hit rate for a short time, one of the most valuable things you can increase. Finally, the Dragoon can tether themselves to a single ally with Dragon Sight, increasing the damage dealt for both the tethered party member and the Dragoon themselves. For pros, the Dragoon has a fairly straightforward rotation. It gets a bit more complicated when factoring in all of your off-global cooldown skills, but with their unique 5-part combos at higher levels, you're set on your ways from the first button you press all the way to the 5th. Along the way, you'll make use of all of that damage utility we mentioned earlier, which enhances raid DPS by quite a bit. Dragoon also has some great burst and sustained AoE, as they have a separate 2-part AoE combo that even refreshes the duration of Blood of the Dragon. Not only does this make it good for AoE, but it can also be used in a pinch to refresh Blood of the Dragon. Dragoon is probably one of the melees with the most cons too. The most common one is that its jump skills have animation locks, meaning that while they're being performed, you can't reposition your character. Over the years, the amount of time that you're position locked has been adjusted quite a bit, but you still don't want to be caught mid-jump during something like an AoE. Their single target DPS is also on the lower end of the melee DPS. Not the lowest, but it's lower than Monk and Samurai on average. They also offer little in the way of non-offensive utilities outside of their role actions. Despite this, Dragoon is considered a staple job choice for endgame content, assuming you're not on the floor, that is. The third job we'll discuss in the melee versus is Ninja. This job was added to the game in 2.4 and has been one of the most sought after jobs since then. This job is unlocked by picking up the Rogue class after completing any other class's level 10 class quest and then unlocking it via the level 30 job quest and so on and so forth. At the earlier levels, it plays like a standard melee DPS, kinda boring, but once you upgrade to Ninja, things quickly start getting more interesting. Ninjas utilize ninjutsu to execute a large variety of attacks. Huton provides more attack speed, Fuma Shuriken and Raiton ninjutsus act as single target burst, Doton and Katan act as AoE damage, and Hyoton allows for binding opponents, not something you'll use in PvE very often. The most important ninjutsu is no doubt Suiton, which gives ninjas in-combat access to one of their most valued utilities, Trick Attack. You can enhance your ninjutsu even further with Kasatsu, which resets the cooldown on your ninjutsu and causes the next one you use to automatically critically hit. Going back to Trick Attack, that deals a decent amount of burst damage, but more importantly, when executed from the rear of a foe, gives them a debuff that increases all damage they take by 10% for 10 seconds. With only a 1-minute cooldown, entire raid groups play around this powerful window in the most optimal way they can, saving cooldowns and bursts to fill that 10-second window with as much damage as they can. This is the ninja's sole DPS utility, both for their personal DPS and for raid utility, but players often value their unique enmity utilities as well. Shadewalker lets the ninja transfer enmity they generate for a short time to another target, and Smokescreen lets you reduce enmity generation on a select target for its duration. With recent additions to tank role actions, these tools aren't as strong as they used to be, but they can still help in scenarios with lots of early fight healing, new target spawns, and tank swaps, sometimes. Ninja at the later levels also adds Ninki to their resource list. Ninki generates on every auto attack as well as when you use the Mug skill, and is used to execute one of 3 of their Stormblood skills. Hellfrog Medium does a burst of AoE damage with no cooldown other than Ninki generation itself. Bavakakra is a single target burst that has a 50-second cooldown, and finally Tenchi Jin is a complicated skill on a 100-second cooldown. During Tenchi Jin, the ninja can't move or execute any actions except for mudras and ninjutsu. As you execute mudras, you can use your ninjutsu skill up to 3 times, with your mudra progress saving between ninjutsus. Let's explain it step by step. You use the skill Tenchi Jin. Use your 10 mudra first and execute a Fuma Shuriken. You then use Chi and execute a Raiton, and because it maintained the use of your 10 before Chi, you don't have to use both of them back to back in order to access Raiton. You can then use Jin and execute Suiton since the skill maintained your previous 10 and Chi. It's an odd skill to explain, but it has a lot of potential power. Not only does it let you use these 3 ninjutsu back to back, but it also doubles their potency, so smart use of this skill is essential to ninja DPS. Just to be clear, that's not the order you have to use them in, that was just an example. As long as you're using a 1-step, 2-step, and 3-step ninjutsu back to back, it doesn't matter which order you actually do them in, as long as you're reaching your desired mudras. Let's move on to the pros. For Ninja, it is regularly considered to be one of the most valued melee DPS in endgame content. Combined with their role actions, they have a huge variety of options to offer their allies for just a single party slot, with the job's own trick attack and enmity tools being among the most valued. They can get around the arena quickly as well with their movement speed and Shikuchi abilities, and they have little reliance on positionals for personal DPS output, except for trick attack. You miss that, everyone will hate you. It also has quick GCDs thanks to the Huton buff from their ninjutsu, so like Monk, its pace can feel accelerated compared to that of the Dragoon. As for the cons of the job, they're mostly based on personal preference. Many have come to find the job to be overly clunky. Some people dislike how Tenchi Jin feels, some people dislike how Ninki works, some don't mind either, but it seems like less and less people are playing it since 4.0 came out. The job also has the lowest potential personal DPS of the 4 melee. It's not bad DPS, it's just the lowest potential personal DPS. This puts additional pressure on using your utilities properly, especially trick attack. If you miss a trick attack by not getting that rear hit, you lose an insane amount of value to your raid, so make sure you know when bosses are turning during their mechanics, or use True North alongside of it if you're a little bit scared. Despite these problems, no one can deny Ninja and its value to raid teams, making it highly sought after. The final melee job in this video is the Samurai. Added in the Stormblood expansion, Samurais are an all DPS, no utility option for players looking to output some serious damage. It can be unlocked once a player hits level 50 as long as they own Stormblood over in Ul'dah. The job focuses around 2 resources to deal its damage. The first are the job's Sens, which are obtained upon using one of your 3 different combo finishers. Depending on how many Sens they have, they can execute their skill Iaijutsu, which lets them expend Sens to execute one of 3 skills. With 1 Sen, a samurai will use Higenbana, a dot that lasts a whole minute. With 2 Sens, Iaijutsu becomes Tenkagoken, a powerful conal AoE. At 3 Sens, the samurai can unleash Madare Setsugeka, which deals a massive amount of single target damage. All 3 of these skills can be enhanced with the Kaiten skill, which buffs your next weapon skill's damage by 50%. Proper use of your Sens are one of the most important aspects of the job's damage output, and since Iaijutsu has a cast time, you need to make sure you're using it at the right time so you don't get yourself killed. Samurai also have another resource called Kenki. As the samurai executes weapon skills, they generate this resource once they've hit level 62, with some weapon skills generating more Kenki based on doing positionals. Kenki is used to access powerful off-global cooldown skills that can deal large single target and AoE damage, especially their level 70 skill, Guren, which deals a massive 800 potency to the first target hit, falling off with each target, but it's still a lot of damage. You can even use Hagakure to convert your Sens into Kenki, giving it some interaction with their other resource. As for utility, as stated earlier, the job has no built-in vital utility. They have some movement skills and Third Eye, which grants them some damage mitigation, and it does allow them to access additional skills, one of which is an improvement for their DPS. They do have the slashing debuff, but this is far from a unique utility, as Ninja and Warrior both provide this debuff as well as all of the other things they provide. The pros of the Samurai are as one-dimensional as the job itself. The damage potential for this job is the highest of any of the 4 melee DPS, making it a powerful choice in both the burst and sustained DPS departments. This is true for both single target and AoE amongst the melee, so once you've mastered this job, expect to pull ahead on the charts. The job itself is also relatively easy to learn compared to the other melee, with the mastery over your Kenki and Sens really being the only tools you need to watch. The job even has very few positionals, so you still want to make sure you get them for those additional Kenki. As another note, this job can be one of the fastest jobs to play, as one of the most popular builds focuses on stacking as much skill speed as possible. Now the cons for the Samurai aren't so much what it does do, and more about what it doesn't do. As stated, the job offers no unique utilities, which puts pressure on personal performance. On most jobs, when your personal DPS maybe isn't as high as somebody else's, at least you can turn to your raid contribution via utility to help make up for it. With Samurai, you're either dominating the meters or providing less than you could be on other jobs. Despite this, as long as you play well, you are more than capable of completing any content in the game on this job like any of the other jobs. Besides, if other jobs screw up something, like a ninja screws up a trick attack, or your Dragoon isn't using their eye as frequently as possible, or the monk isn't timing the Brotherhood, I mean, that also reduces efficiency, but it's probably easier to use those things on cooldown than it is for a samurai to make up for a deficiency in their DPS. So, as is customary, I now have to pick a winner. Now, this is the first time we've had 4 jobs in a versus video, but it's also one of the easiest choices to make. Personally, I gotta give it to Ninja. There is no job that is played around as much as this one, and the trick attack skill overall. And that should speak to a job's overall contribution to raid DPS and its value. A lot of raid comps do include 2 melee though, so the other spot could fall between Monk and Dragoon for like a second choice since, like I said, there's 2 slots. Dragoon may do less DPS than Monk, but the damage utility it offers is awesome. Bards love them, I as a Monk love them, everybody loves them. Nothing like fighting over who gets the Dragon Sight when pushing personal DPS. Oh, I don't care if it's better on them, just give it to me, please. Monk, on the other hand, outputs a lot more DPS, so much so that at some point it was even ahead of Samurai, which prompted even more buffs. With updates to certain job skills such as Brotherhood and Riddle of Wind, it has become much more desired by raid groups. Warriors also quite enjoy that Brotherhood lines up with every inner release. It's really tough to determine that second place winner though, as both candidates are fairly even. I'm just going to stick with that first place winner of Ninja. As for the Samurai, since it's falling into 4th place, I don't hate the job, but I feel like it could do with even more DPS buffs. With recent buffs, it is ahead like it should be. I just feel like it could be doing even more to make up for that lack of utility. A good Samurai, though, is a good player, and as long as they're a good player, I'm cool with them. And that's going to be a wrap for our melee versus. Apologies this video took so long to get out between a few things happening in my life and honestly me going through 5 iterations of this script that I just didn't like. This video took way too long to come out. But it's here, it's done, and now I can't wait for them to buff or nerf something in the next patch and for me to have to do it all over again. We'll see what happens because we know they're making job adjustments in 4.4. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and check out the rest of the Final Fantasy XIV content on the channel. I will see all of you in the next video, which will hopefully be more on time. And until then, take care.